Hey, this is Will from Chillhouse Studios, and we're here with Cela from the Lowell Chamber Orchestra, and really thrilled to have him here today to sit down and have a little conversation about the orchestra and about him and all the work that he does, both with orchestra and in other areas as well, and musically just find out a little more about him and his life and so forth. So welcome to the interview.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
Yes, so I've been so fortunate to get to work a lot with the Lowell Chamber Orchestra in particular, and Orlando also on some solo projects. He's a master flautist for sure. Done a couple records with you, and maybe more than two. But we do, what about a dozen orchestra dates a year, and it's just been a real educational and just very fulfilling thing for me personally to be able to witness the kind of music that you guys bring and play and present live. You know, it's just so much more powerful and intimate and everything else. I think when you hear any music live, but certainly when you hear an orchestra playing live, be it a smaller size orchestra or a larger size orchestra. So how did you get into conducting?
Thank you for having me, first of all. Thank you for being here, and always thank you for being at every concert. It's been great. So I was at NEC doing my master's degree, and I was doing my master's degrees in flute playing, and I took a lot of classes in conducting. I saw that as an opportunity to help others, bring them together and produce like music by many people together. I did not have many teachers who saw that as an opportunity, so I thought I could do better than them, right? So I tried to, work in a way with my colleagues back then, and conduct in a way that was inspiring and that we can all be collaborative together. We were all students together, same year, so nobody was, above the other. So that's what was my inspiration, I would get my friends together and we would do pieces that I wanted to do together, and I would just lead them through their interpretation.
So it was kind of like being in a band almost.
It was exactly like being in a band. Somebody actually put in Facebook that, orchestras are 1800s covers band, and it's
great.
So true. In a way, it's very true.
That is so great. I never thought of it like that. That's awesome. So that's how the orchestra got formed, and then you brought it into a more formal setting in Lowell, because you live in Lowell, right?
Actually, I live in Arlington, so that was me getting into conducting. And then as I graduated at NEC, I had a ensemble with my friends, students, and whatnot. And then I stopped conducting for a long time. I had a big gap. I didn't do music at all for like many years, for like about 8 years. And then I got back into it. I started to conduct the Arlington Philharmonic.
Right.
And then as I was teaching in UMass Lowell, I was doing flute lessons. I was an adjunct there. And I had this one very talented student, flute student. And she got invited to play with the orchestra. And in UMass Lowell, the band program is great, but the orchestra is not great. So she didn't know this incredible piece that she had been invited to play, which was an iconic piece for flute and an orchestra. So I asked her how couldn't she know this, right? She was a flute player. And she told me that, she lived in Lowell as a student, and orchestras were far away and they were expensive. Go to a BSO from Lowell, it would take a lot of time, and the tickets were expensive and the parking was crazy. So I decided, okay, Lowell needs an orchestra, and that's when I formed the Lowell Chamber Orchestra. And the reason why it's chamber is because, it's what I could do at the time, It's just like just small people. But the idea was not to have an amateur orchestra, but to have a professional orchestra. I wanted people to see like BSO caliber music in Lowell and free for my students. So I decided that it's gonna be absolutely free. Anybody can walk in and experience like the best of classical music without, any socioeconomic worries.
That's amazing. And that's to this day. And I think the last performance we did was to capacity.
Great. The last performance, I think, was the first time we actually sold out. It's true.
Right. And just we've been seeing the numbers grow ever since I started, for sure.
Yes. Well, let's hope that it keeps going. I've been trying to serve the community the best I can, and I'm just hoping that people will know that we exist and come to the concerts and so forth.
100%. So the LCO has a lot of focus on living composers and certainly modern 20th century composers. How do the pieces get selected for the orchestra?
Great question. there's a lot of audience members that know a lot of classical music. They love classical music and they have their favorite composers, the run-of-the-mill dead composers from the classical period, the romantic period. And they're not very well aware that classical music is alive and growing and developing. So the idea is that I offer a major piece of music that is very well known, it's a very standard one, but at the same time I choose a living composer that I like, or that is local, that is young, that deserves some promotion, right? So I mix those. So I try to make sure that I bring those folks that love classical music, the standard repertoire, and they get exposed to the new music. And at the same time, composers, living composers get exposed, and as you know, they get a recording, they get a video, and in that way, they just continue to develop their career. So I'm trying to do education and exposure at the same time.
Right, because it's so important to highlight modern and living composers to let people know that this is a living art,
Correct. So what I tell people is when Beethoven was writing his music, that was living composer, contemporary music, right? And at the same time, when Mozart was alive, that was living composer writing contemporary music all the time. It was written by them. So it's the same thing. We're just doing exactly the same thing that was done before. We're just doing it today, and we're trying to expand the careers of composers, particularly BIPOC composers, women composers, marginalized communities that have been producing a lot of fabulous music historically, and they deserve to be showcased.
100%, that's great. So how is it different conducting a modern piece as opposed to a classical piece, or is it?
Oh, it is very different. So again, once we talk about standard repertoire, we're talking about standard techniques, standard harmonies, standard melodies, and whatnot. And I have to admit that once you get to a certain year, you don't even need to conduct some of those pieces. Those pieces were not meant to be conducted. So, for example, there is that piece that we did a couple of years ago, which is called the Farewell Symphony. That piece never had a conductor. So when you get to a modern piece, you're dealing with a completely different technique, a completely different voice, somebody who requires a completely different approach to something that is completely new. A lot of the times, those pieces are meant to be conducted because they can be extremely complicated. They require, extraordinary seating, different seating. The harmonies are different. The rhythms are very different. So at that point, it's a completely different skill set where you really have to reinvent the wheel in order to be able to promote this music, extract it from the score and present it to the audience.
Right, that's amazing. What have been some of your favorite works to conduct in the last few seasons, and what have been some of your more challenging ones?
My favorite works, I must say that the last concert we did, the Mozart Requiem, was a highlight. First time the Lowell Chamber Orchestra got to collaborate with a chorus, so that was momentous. Like I said before, the Haydn, the Farewell Symphony, beautiful piece of music, and the beauty of that piece, the shtick of that piece, to say something else, is that the musicians leave little by little throughout the performance. So at that point, that was my time to actually leave the orchestra, just play by themselves until everybody left except the first two violins, right? So that was a really exciting moment for me, Those were probably my two favorite pieces. I have to say that one of the most challenging pieces that we had to do was a piece by a New Zealand composer, which was based on punk grunge music. And she, the composer, was inspired by her son's punk grunge band. And she put this style of music into a string orchestra. So it was very, very difficult to explain to all of these classically trained musicians how to play punk grunge, right? And to project that. That was probably the hardest piece we have done so far.
Right. Rob, who works here with us, submitted this question. Over the years, certain conductors have been renowned for conducting specific composers. For example, Bernstein conducting Beethoven or Levine conducting Wagner. If the music written on the paper always stays the same, what does the conductor bring to the piece that makes it unique or powerful? When conducting classic works, do you lean more towards historical accuracy or a unique interpretation?
So I guess it depends on the piece. It's true, many major conductors are known because of some of the composers that they conduct, right? Exactly like Rob said. So, for example, Bernstein and Mahler have a very strong connection, right? And with how Lowell works, it's hard to do that. We meet only a few days before the concert. So, as opposed to other orchestras that are meeting constantly, it's very difficult to like reinvent a piece in such a short amount of time. So what I try to do personally is present it as close as what the composer wanted, in my opinion. So I do a lot of research before that first concert, and I do a lot of studying, and when I get there, I just try to present it in the same way that I thought, Beethoven wanted this to be heard, or Haydn wanted it to be heard, right? And in the case of living composers, it's very easy. You just talk to them and you ask them questions and whatnot, and then you present the piece depending on how they wanted it. So I don't think we are in the way to reinterpret these pieces at this point. So I'm just trying to approach it in a very historical effect. I try to get it as close as I can with our modern instruments, and to pretty much present the spirit of the piece, the story that is embedded in the piece. I try to extract that to the best of my possibilities.
And you do a fantastic, beautiful job of that.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it.
So we have coming up next weekend, I think the last performance in the series, this year's series, which is, and I believe it's, is it June 13th, Saturday?
Right, it's June 15th. Yeah, 15th, it's a Saturday, June 15th. Right, and every June we do what we call our Pride concert. Sometimes we try to feature living composers. We do a call for scores, right? Yeah. And this year we didn't get any living composers submitting, unfortunately. So we're all going to do composers that are very well known, that happen to be members of the LGBTQ community, even before they would call that. So we're going to be doing a piece by Aaron Copland, who was American, and again, he was very comfortable in his gay being. He was very, very open about it. Samuel Barber, we're going to be playing an amazing piece called the Capricorn Concerto. And we're going to close also the concert with a piece by Tchaikovsky. His beautiful, amazing Serenade for Strings.
Beautiful. Well, we can't wait to see it, and we hope that everybody will consider to come out and see the orchestra on June 15th, Saturday in Lowell. It's free, so there's really no reason not to be there. And I want to thank Orlando so much for coming by and stopping by and hanging out with us for a little while.
Thank you, Will. Thanks for having me, please.